Supervisors Meeting, recorded October 1st, 2019.
No, I didn't hear.
It's 5 o'clock. We'll call the county board to order. My clicker.
It's with the name tag.
We're pausing for a second to do a roll call. I don't seem to have my, she isn't going to let me vote. Stamp it, huh? If you're present, push yes and confirm.
All right, everyone's here. Good. Well, Splinter and Jankowski are.
23 ayes, 2 excused.
Pledge to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Invocation by Supervisor Barry Jankowski.
Good afternoon, fellow colleagues and friends. We gather here today to once again start the process of another annual budget. As always, there will be tough decisions to be made. Let us look to a higher power to help guide this body to the correct choices for the people of Portage County. We humbly ask that same higher power to watch over our military and first responder personnel at all times so that they may always return to the safety of home and the love of family and friends. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. I ask that if you know of or see domestic violence, that you reach out to help in every way possible, for home should always be a safe place. I also ask that we keep in our thoughts and prayers fellow Supervisor Mike Splinter as he recovers. And by the way, the first pitch is at 7:08. Amen.
With that, there's also a card going around for the supervisors to sign for Mr. Splinter. So if you haven't signed it, I don't know where it's at, but raise your hand or try and make sure that you get an opportunity to sign it if you would, please. We'll get that off to Mr. Splinter and hope he's doing well. So thank you for that. Review and approval of September 17th, 2019 minutes. Motion by Supervisor O'Brien, seconded by Supervisor Gussel. Discussions, corrections, changes. All those in favor with aye? Aye. Opposed? Minutes approved. Correspondence.
In your packet was the memo from Chair Haga regarding the upcoming county board meetings.
Public notice agenda items. There were no items were received by the agenda publication deadlines. Public comments. Members of the public who wish to address the county board on specific agenda items must register their requests at this time, with such comments subject to reasonable control of the county board chair as set forth in Robert's Rules of Order. State your name, ma'am. And tonight we're really not having any public input because there's no action items on the agenda. We've got the executive's budget, and then we have a committee of the whole. So there is no action items on tonight's agenda. So what item would you want to speak to?
The second one, and according to the agenda item, it's one of the agenda items.
It's an agenda item, but okay, there's, we're not going to take any comments from the public during that portion of it. And the reason being is that we have never done a committee of the whole before, and it's one opportunity for the supervisors to talk amongst themselves. The public hands are always untied to talk amongst themselves to whoever they want. county board supervisors aren't able to talk amongst themselves. They're not able to talk to one-on-one and then talk to another one. That's a walking quorum. So for those reasons, this committee gets no opportunity to ever talk amongst themselves as a group unless we do a committee of the whole, which suspends Robert's Rules of Order and allows the committee to talk amongst themselves. We've got a gentleman here from Wisconsin Counties Association to help us facilitate that because it's the first time we've done it in Portage County, but other counties around the state use it quite often and quite regularly. So.
With all due respect, the language of the agenda item is misleading because it clearly states that public comment is allowed on agenda item. Thank you.
There's actually two. We're having the county board is one group, and then we will reconvene into the committee of the whole. So there's actually, I wouldn't say two different items, but, and the first one has no action. So duly noted. So, presentation. Chris Holman, County Exec, 2020 budget presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. So another budget season is upon us. I'd like to first say thanks to the Finance Department for all the work they put into this, along with the department heads. It's no easy task to pull this off each year. I'll try to go through some of this relatively quickly. You all have copies in front of you. And of course, if anybody has questions from the public or the board, I'm always available and you can get a hold of me. I know this was in the packet for the board, but just for the sake of the public or those watching or listening, October 1st is today, so I'm presenting the proposed budget. The next week on the 8th, there will be a review of the proposed budget. There's board comments, opportunity for public comments. There's no formal amendments made at that meeting, but they can refer things back to the Finance Committee, which will meet on the 21st to review any formal amendments that are made, and then November 4th is our annual board meeting where we'll take up the final budget. If there is a veto on anything, then we'd have to meet again on November 12th. Just a reminder I want to put in there, because this is the kind of things that I think about when I'm trying to make budget decisions in this role, or even in other boards that I serve on where I have fiduciary responsibility. But it's just a good reminder to everybody that this fiduciary duty we have requires us to stay objective, unselfish, responsible, honest, trustworthy, and efficient. And I have no doubt that we will do those things. I think this budget and in general with capped levies, I think the third bullet point is something that I stress quite a bit in terms of needing to exercise the reasonable care so that we're not putting ourselves at too much risk. Like being able to balance sort of the status quo we're in with some ability to try to forecast things and try to get as much of a grasp on things as we can given the status quo that we've been dealt. The next couple slides are just trying to kind of give you an idea of how am I thinking about the financial picture on across the horizon, not just in the county. It's worth noting that the federal deficit passed $1 trillion last month in September. I mention it because we do get a fair amount of federal monies via the state, and of course the state takes their cut. But if the federal deficit is going to be close to $200 billion more than it was last year, they're going to have to find cuts somewhere. I don't know where that would be, but it's just something that I think about as I think there's a potential for monies that we may receive from them through state agencies that they would have to go down, and if they do, the lion's share of those that funding is tied to mandatory programming, which then of course ties our hands in having to find that funding to make up the difference. Generally speaking, I'd say there's uncertainty at the state level. That obviously creates quite a bit of uncertainty at the local level. So it's hard to ascertain, necessarily on one item to the next where things might shake out. And so it is, perennially difficult to kind of try to figure out what sort of things are you going to be handed from the state. Just as a point of reference, like every board I'm on, where that's a federal board, like workforce development, nonprofit boards, state boards, everybody who has an investment portfolio or finances, which is all of them, and they all have sizable budgets, they're all shifting to a more conservative financial approach, mainly because there's likely changes in the market and the economy in general. Market forecasts, no one has a crystal ball, of course, but our investments have performed pretty well as of late, but there's no guarantee that that's going to continue. And if they take a dip, then that can cause lots of budgetary problems as well. It's unlikely that the sort of success in investments, from my perspective, is going to continue given the market influences at play now. But I mention this because it's worrisome to me for any recurring expenditures we have that are being funded by investment returns, which are variable. And the investment world in general has been waiting for the proverbial bubble to burst. It's been probably 6 years now where people keep trying to put their finger on it, but the general consensus is that the correction is long overdue. So the big picture for us in Portage County in 2019, unfunded mandates from the state, they're not unusual these days. Primarily this year, that would be 2 positions coming down to us from the state for assistant district attorneys. The county has a statutory obligation to staff that office, so it's split between the state and the county. Managing deficits in Health and Human Services, or HHS, and then managing a budget shortfall this year, which isn't too bad, but also a shortfall nonetheless. One thing that is starting to happen for the county is that we have a trending over-reliance on one-time investment returns. Again, this is the point I just made, that are being used to fund recurring operational costs. Like, that's not a sustainable approach that you want to be getting into. And we're early enough in that sort of experience that I think it won't be too hard to correct, but it's something to keep in mind as we move forward. Because essentially, if you have gaps in your budget that you are filling with investment returns, if you have good investment returns one year, then that's great for you. But if that changes at all to the next year, now again, you're making up that difference. And the further you build that house of cards up on investment returns, the more fragile that situation becomes. So one of the things that I'll look to address is how to try to do an appropriate forecasting of what can we tend to expect, good or bad, from our investments over time, and then bring that to the county board and maybe even establish a policy to say something like, based on all this information, we shouldn't use any more than X amount to address any sort of recurring operational costs. The district attorney's office, there's a lot of buzz on this issue around the state. Many different counties are curious as to what others are doing. Our district attorney's office has requested to maintain the same 1-to-1 ratio of legal county staff to assistant district attorney. We put out a call a couple weeks ago, as soon as we knew we had 2 actually, to figure out how are other counties addressing it. And the counties I listed up there are, roughly a third of the counties that have got back to us up to this point, but they all staff their office at a 1-to-1 ratio or greater, or some sort of equivalent, with a paralegal, legal secretary type. So larger and smaller counties, as you'd expect, tend to have unique arrangements. Some counties got like a 0.2 FTE assistant district attorney, so that that is a more complicated sort of, do we need an extra person to help run that 0.2 person. For me, I'm inclined to stick with the 1-to-1 ratio for a couple of reasons. One, the DA's office has been asking for assistance from the state for about 30 years. So getting the actual assistance is a big deal, and it's kind of a strike while the iron is hot sort of situation. But there's also the reality that the state it has been talking about a 4th Circuit in Portage County for quite some time. If that were to happen, then you would want to have these positions and the equivalent staffing there to handle what that 4th Circuit would bring in terms of traffic and court time and so on and so forth. For Health and Human Services, I just wanted to give everybody kind of an idea of where are counties in our regions in terms of spending per capita. So as you'd expect, there's some inversion or correlationship with, as the population goes down, some of the money spent per capita goes up. But you can see that Portage County at $259 per person, we are in the lowest quartile in the state. We're well below the state average of $326. And I put asterisks next to Wood County because they're a good comparison, about the same population. And you can see the difference there between $259 and $446. And really, this is just saying something that I think we've probably known for quite some time, and that Health and Human Services could use more funding in Portage County than they've had historically, or that they do now. HHS math, beware the simple cut. This is just, I'm trying to give you an idea of how you have to look at some of these programs. It is not unique to Health and Human Services. It's other areas of the county would have a similar sort of, another 2 or 3 analytical steps to trying to diagnose the situation and resolve it. But just as a for example, and this is based somewhat on reality, in that if you had a program that served 10 children and that cost the county $150,000 per year, on the surface it might look like, well, impact 150 grand, maybe it's only serving 10 kids, we could find a way to treat that situation differently and save some money. But if you did cut that program and it ended up that half of the children that were in that program kind of fell out of where they were off the track that they were on and end up in a court-ordered placement, which for this county is trending upward at a somewhat alarming rate, that cut then turns into 5 individuals times $15,000 a month or more, up to 20 grand a month. So now you've made a cut thinking it was a good idea, but now you're spending that same amount in 2 months instead. And that's kind of the thing you have to really be cautious of when you're thinking about addressing funding shortages. It's the same thing with highway. Like some counties got themselves into trouble by reappropriating different highway funding, and what they did is that they damaged the way the state treated them with the state formula. And so they thought, well, we could move money around and take this money from a wheel tax, let's say, and not spend it there. And by doing that, they effectively lessened the kind of percentage of county investment in the highway, which then led to their state allocation going down, which is very counterintuitive to them and troublesome. So just 2 examples of, the steps I take when I'm looking at all these different pieces. So what did we do for Health and Human Services this year? To meet its needs today, and I'm not even talking about 6 months from today, but right now, they need roughly $500,000. That's based on what they've had to deal with up to now. They could use more, I just said that. But luckily, the state increased funding in key areas to the tune of $321,000. That's not something that I would count on very often, but thankfully this year, pretty much a universal outcry from every county in the state led to this funding response from them. We still had to add $178,000 of levy into Health and Human Services to cover the balance. So that current trend is alarming. It could get worse. I can tell you that some of our northern counterparts are already facing very tough decisions like, do we fund public safety or do we fund Health and Human Services? And though we're somewhat of a small county, those counties are so much smaller, their net new construction or additional budget per year is somewhere around $30,000 to $40,000, which does very little for you if you have significant issues with opioids or child welfare, adult protective placement, any of these things that are very high cost and completely out of our control. So this area of the budget, and what I mean by that is Health and Human Services, has a serious potential for requiring significant cuts in the future. And I only mention that because we need to have a very healthy respect for the ability for swings there, if they were to occur, to force our hand. So situational rationalities in the budget. What I mean by that is that you wouldn't do these things if circumstances were different, but we do them now because we have to. Primarily, I'm talking about capped levies, a real inability to generate revenue of any kind. For 2020, and this is just an example of like how does it work this year, okay? So we were able to hold insurance premiums for the county flat. We did that with $1 million of restricted insurance reserves. What that means is that there's an insurance reserve that employees pay into. That's all it can be used for. So we have a healthy reserve. We said we can take the $1 million of restricted reserves, hold the premiums flat. What that did was allow departments to balance their budgets at a 0% target, which is effectively where we're at because we have a very small increase per year. By balancing their budget through that, by not having dramatic increases in insurance, for instance, that helped us then pay wages based on a salary plan and also have enough money to give employees a 1% cost of living adjustment, which no one's writing home about, but it's better than 0%. This will not happen next year, and I'm just telling you that because for as far as I can tell, we've been having very much a year-to-year, and this is an out of necessity, approach to the budget. This year, this worked, but next year we won't, this formula, this equation that I just explained won't be there. So just as a for instance hypothetical, say you took $500,000 because you still had a healthy reserve and it was a prudent decision to do so, and then that $500,000 floats through the rest of the budget, you know, there will be pluses and minuses along the way because there's a lot of moving parts of this budget, but at the end of the day, it's probably going to create some sort of gap that you're going to have to address. So what we need to do is balance this year-to-year approach, which has been successful despite, you know, the challenging circumstances, with a longer-term planning perspective, you know, thinking more 2, 3, 5, 10 years down the road, trying to develop forecasting tools to say, how can we give ourselves more of a degree of certainty with what we know, and then use those tools to kind of steer the conversation throughout the year as we move through the budget. Because the budget is a living document. That's often lost on a lot of people. It seems very final when it's adopted, but realistically, it's always breathing in and out. You know, things happen to it, and then at the end of the year, we get to kind of assess. So expenditure reductions. So there's a portion of the budget called non-county agency, that's the non-county agency budget. In 2018, I informed every entity in that area of the budget that the county can't guarantee funding from year to year. There's funding needs across the county, and I really did think of recommending cutting this entire portion of the budget. Statutes kind of limit what counties can actually do anyway in terms of funding, but you know, and you'll see where this money actually goes later. But instead, I'm recommending the non-renewal of 2 funding requests. And generally speaking, given the fiscal situation we're in, our current inability to kind of meet our own needs or even keep up with market rates, whether it's for personnel, wages, any of these things, the county is an unreliable source of funding for non-county agencies. So making up the deficit, roughly half of the deficit we had of $250,000 was made up with an increased amount of investment returns. As I said previously, that's an unsustainable approach. It doesn't mean that you should never use investment returns to address operational costs. It just means you have to be very careful about how you do it. And you don't want to have an over-reliance. We do need to reduce expenses in some areas or where we can, because we do have a lot of unknowns in the future that are associated with big price tags, and we'll see that in a minute. But in my personal opinion, I think that if I'm looking at, okay, I have a shortfall of X amount, it really doesn't matter, that I believe that we should exhaust the non-county agency pieces before we start going after the county. Like if, you know, and that's nothing against any of the non-county agencies. It's just that my focus has to be on the county as an organization and figuring out how to keep that financial picture as, you know, sound as possible. And I'll be very frank in the fact that the non-county agency budget is not big by any stretch of the imagination. There is not a lot of places to go for funding. And if any of these trends that we're experiencing continue down the road, you're going to be cutting county programs, services, and personnel, again, just because you have to make up the difference for these mandatory programs. I hope that doesn't happen. I hope that things change. I hope that we can find ways across the state, get different permissions from the state to better manage all of this. But, and you know, it's not fun to be the bearer of bad news all the time when I talk about these things, but the reality is that we're threading the needle every year, and it's not a real confidence-inspiring sort of thing. So here is the non-county agency options. Like, this is the budget in its entirety, aside from our Humane Society contract, which is up for renewal next year, and insurances, which are not an option to go to. So really, the business council is at the top of the list, and then on down to $2,000 for the fairs. The 2 in red are the ones that I'm recommending non-renewal of. If you have roughly $100,000 to make up, then it's mostly a number game in terms of, just by virtue of being the largest amount in that section of the budget, the $80,000 goes a long way to making that deficit whole. The Housing Authority is a $20,000 funding request, and I'll explain both of these here in a second. But you can see too, if you wanted to take all the others and put them together, it's not even the amount of the business council. So it's a challenging area to draw money from, but this is something that it does exist. And honestly, when I think about this, I think it might be prudent at some point to have a policy as well to say, when it comes to non-county agency options, we should maybe set a cap at how much money we give to anybody. And primarily because I think it worries me if the county gets in the business of giving people any degree of existential funding that is a big deal to them when we are, like I said previously, unreliable as a source of that revenue. Because if we need it, we're going to have to take it. For the Business Council, they do a lot of great work in the county. I'm on the board. I'm very familiar with what they do. I've participated in tons of their events. You know, Todd and I get along. I value what they do quite a lot. But this is strictly mostly a numbers thing in terms of trying to find the money to do it. The non-renewal this year doesn't keep us from renewing a contract with them in the future. It's just this year is what we're faced with, so this year is where we're looking. And that's really all you can say about it. There's nothing else to say except, you know, if you've got a small hole, thankfully, then you can fill it with this, partially with this. The Housing Authority does require some more explanation, and what that means is that when it was initially formed, it was a part of the county, and in 2016, it separated completely from the county, and that was because it's a federally subsidized agency that never should have been a part of the county. And that was a long conversation that took place over a couple of years, and effectively it led to the split. And you know, at one time, the Housing Authority employees were considered county employees, and that all changed as well. They can't be county employees. The county has no financial obligations to the Housing Authority. This was all, you know, and I referenced the resolution where this is all discussed. So if you really want to see the whole discussion on this, it's in the minutes on the website, but I'll give you the resolution so you can search for it. But effectively, it should have always been a standalone organization. After the split of the county and the Housing Authority, it was decided then to help the transition with a $20,000, essentially a donation. It was just to assist in a transition. It was never meant to be long-term. And so in that sense, when you look at, okay, it was never meant to be something that the county was directly involved in, though we do have a relationship via statute as far as funding goes. And for the record, I did, you know, the first people to know about this were the Business Council and the Housing Authority. I talked to them about it. This is not news to them, though it is news to you today. The agreement between the Housing Authority and Portage County still provides for in-kind assistance from the county, and that's another factor to consider because no other non-county agency has those benefits. The services that are still available to them are free legal services and representation, and this is for their employees or the authority as an organization. So through the county, they can get free legal services and representation through the Corp Counsel's office. They can get consulting services through purchasing and IT, and of course, we still give per diems and mileage for the commissioners. And the resolution there, 140-2014-2016, that's the resolution that the county board, the final decision to separate from the county, and then right after that resolution in the minutes, you'll see the agreement between the two entities. And it explains all of the things that still exist, don't exist. It tells it does a good job of telling the story about why did this happen. So where are we headed? This year, I can say that I've effectively bought the board a year to make decisions on infrastructure before some high-cost investments need to be made. That's not to generate a sense of urgency. That's just to say that some things are happening no matter what we do. Namely, we have an IT data center that has to be replaced. We're at the end of life. This next year, we're past the end of life. So we're trying to take some strategies to replace different blades on the data center rather than do the whole shoot and match, because essentially, if we have any direction, whether that's staying, going, or whatever it may be, you can incorporate that into the planning process, into the implementation piece, and you can ensure that you minimize the amount of money you might have to spend if you build it here and then have to move it without having thought about that move. The IT data center is $1 to $2 million easily, and the county dispatch. This is law enforcement dispatch for all agencies in the county. Same with fire, EMS. Excuse me. That's to be determined. The RFP process is in place. There's working groups talking through what are the priorities for them, but it won't be cheap, long story short. So those two things are like, no matter what, we got a few $1 million showing up, and these are on the capital improvement plan, at least the data center is. Well, no, they both are. Where else are we going? And this is just another key point that, it's just the reality we're dealing with, is that we have a lot of unknowns that are associated with big price tags. I said it earlier, but the healthcare center is out there. That is not a small price tag no matter what happens there. Building projects, we don't know what's going on there. Even if we know without building, you're still staring tens of millions of dollars in the face, whether it's 10 to 15 million for renovating this building, 26 million if you want to renovate the LEC and jail over there. I mean, we don't have to do any of that, of course, too, but if we did something like that, with the unknown piece, you're looking at some spending needing to take place for at least some basic maintenance. General repairs costing much more than usual. This is primarily because you're dealing with old infrastructure. So like Judge Pflugar talks a lot about trying to get generators improved for this building, but that takes quite a lot of work when you're drilling through 1958 infrastructure to rewire a generator to fund more than a few coffee pots, which have a surprisingly large pull on a generator. The other issue is that in many areas, there's no parts anymore. If it breaks, there's no way to get a part. So now you're not just replacing the part, you got to replace the whole thing. If the whole thing fits within what it fits in. If that doesn't fit in it, then you got to replace the whole thing that's in. So long story short, what used to be maybe a small charge to fix something, relatively innocuous, now has become more complicated because the parts aren't made anymore. They're not available. Or if they are, maybe they're on Amazon for 10 times the amount because the guy or girl knows what they got. There's also other county infrastructure. I'm mentioning this because we often don't talk about that when we have these other conversations. Guilfrey Center, when it rains a lot, it floods in the basement floor. It happened a couple weeks ago. So it's raining a lot these days. That's an issue. County City Building, I already talked about that briefly, but these are not things that are new to any of us, I think, but it's just in the grand context of what we're dealing with in terms of year-to-year finances and long-term capital improvement, infrastructure, et cetera. These are the things that are framing it, and it's a lot. It's a lot at once to try to deal with, it's a big puzzle without a doubt. So I brought back the capped levy constrictor because, if it's not this picture of a guy getting strangled to death by a snake, it's kind of like that scene in The Matrix where the person's dodging all the bullets, and that's kind of what the budget process feels like. You're like, please don't let me go. Our challenges, this is the same slide I put up last year, and I crossed off a couple to say it's not all crazy news. We did resolve a couple of things. We got the new EMS contracts done. We solved a big portion of our highway department short-term borrowing situation. The rest of these situations are still things that we're dealing with, but and I've mentioned most of them already. So we're certainly in a kind of Groundhog Day scenario, and we're not alone, where a lot of the issues we're confronting this year are the same as last year. How we made it this year, 0%. I had a request from the media, like, what do departments come and request from you? And I say nothing, because I tell them they have 0%, so that's the target. Can you hit 0% every time? No, it's not realistic, but if you're aiming for 0, you're going to be closer to that than if you're aiming for 4. So this really goes a very long way to helping us make the budget work, and that's why I led off with the finance department and the department heads and the board and everybody else who supported all the decisions to try to keep things going. 2020 budget assumptions. A lot of this information is in your budget book, so I'll go through this somewhat quickly, but I'll hit the key points. We did get a net new growth of 2.043%, so that's an increase over last year of, roughly 0.22%. Better than nothing for sure. It still is not a dramatically huge increase, so there's still the challenges that I've mentioned. We did include $69,500 of an increase for tax levy support for capital projects. The budget is balanced and doesn't create a structural deficit, which is always important. The personnel costs do reflect that 1% cost of living adjustment that I mentioned. Just as a point of information, personnel services is $45 million of our budget, which is a very significant portion of that. So when we talk about where would you have to cut if you really had to, people are going to be a part of that equation if you get to there. If you don't get there, hallelujah. This year, we use an additional $140,000 roughly of investment income to make the budget whole. Again, I think that's unsustainable. It's something you want to have a good strategy for. So we have to develop that strategy. The healthcare center budget for 2020 reflects an operating loss of around $900,000. We'll be meeting soon to talk about the referendum and how much we'll levy from the $1.4 million that it authorizes. Currently, they're projecting a surplus for 2019, which is essentially unused funding from the referendum, but again, that may change. We'll see at the end of the year. The revenue highlight is sales tax increased 2.7%, so that helps. You know, it's one of the only sources we have for recurring revenue generation. The 2020 levy per 1,000 of equalized value, so the tax rate is $4.18 for the operating levy. That's down from $4.32, and that $4.32 number includes the additional money we levied for the healthcare center last year. The debt service levy tax rate is 59 cents, so that's up from 53 cents. We did have some borrowing for the highway project, so that is an influence there. The countywide EMS levy is up from 38 cents to 40 cents. That's largely reflected in the new contracts and also in equipment needs, capital improvements and things like that for the vehicles. Bridge and culvert aid levy stayed the same. So the overall levy is $31 million roughly. The tax rate per $1,000 equalized value is $5.18, which is down from $5.24. Incidentally, $5.18 is where we were 2 years ago. So we're inhabiting the same general area in terms of that number. The tax support, where is it going? You can see the percentages of, the lion's share, 3/4 is in the sheriff's office, health and human services, highway, general government, which would be your support staff, and debt service. The balance makes up the last quarter, and overall you can see where the large need is. Fiscal awareness, I said this last year as well, but we need to focus on the mandated programs and services, not because we hope things will go wrong there, but we need to be prepared for things to go wrong if they do. Because it's kind of like I was talking earlier with the finance director, and there were municipalities in the Detroit area who saw things going wrong, and had they put a pencil to paper and drawn the chart, they could have said, well, this is not looking so good if we project this out. And they could have prepared for that, but they didn't. So then when you get in that position, you're making lots of reactionary calls, which tend to be not the ideal. I said it last year, no paving roads to hell with new initiatives. What I mean by that is we want to do good things in the county, but at the same time, we got to do what we already do well and make sure that that's funded before we start taking on more and more and more, because that expansionist, sort of approach is eventually going to force you to make some decisions about what you already do. Now, those decisions are well within the purview of the county board. I'm just saying that we want to think long and hard about what we want to do if it's new, if it doesn't have sustainable funding, or where are you going to take the funding from to make that work. And that's never going to be an easy discussion. Maybe those decisions will have to happen at some point, but long story short, I don't think you can find any department or any service in the county that someone somewhere doesn't place a high value on. So planning for the long term with the short term, educating ourselves and the public, and prioritizing all discretionary spending. So this year was step one for that. Department heads have identified their priorities. Next year I'm going to bring the board into that conversation and get the board to identify their priorities as they see that information from department heads. And we can put those two together, see how the budget shakes out based in part on that conversation. It's not like a deterministic tool. And then in 2022, that budget should have kind of a tested, refined approach with a prioritization process in play. But by and large, my focus is keeping the county's house in order or getting it there. Moving forward, as I've said all along, these deficits at the state and continued cost shifting to us, which is happening more and more, is going to pose a serious challenge. Whether that's highways, whether that's any area of our budget, the state has said they've shifted a lot of things to the local level. Let's just put it that way. And I mentioned all that already. So thank you for listening. I could probably talk about this for another few hours quite easily. If there are questions from the board or from the public on any of this, by all means, give me a call, email me, reach out to me. I'm happy to go meet people wherever they want. Small group, large group, individual, I don't care. I do it all. It's important to have those conversations. If people want to come to the office, that's fine too. So I know you have an important conversation to get to, so I will leave it at that.
Bob, there's no comments tonight to this, so, but I will recognize you.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
I said there's no comments in this portion of it unless it's something else non-related to that, but I'll still recognize you. But this is just a presentation by the exec. So our next meeting on the 8th is when we have the interaction back and forth, so.
I'll wait.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Executive Holman.
I'll take a motion to reset, whoops. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Jane.
Any questions? I'll be shorter than I have
I knew
been
you
in the
weren't
past.
feeling well, so I thought I'd skip you.
Move me right along, so I'll be shorter. You should have 2 documents before you, actually 3. One's a budget in brief, and that's kind of what I'm going to walk through tonight. And the other is the larger budget document. And then you should also have a publication. That's what's going to go in the newspaper. It's a 1-page handout. Is there a clicker? So, beginning of the book, there's a message from Chris, a little bit about our community profile, Portage County's organizational chart. These are all documents that are also in the larger budget document as well. This is just kind of an overview about how we're organized and structured. This also is how the book is put together. So we organize the budget by function. So you'll find a lot of the tabs are general government, public safety, public works. That's how we organize all our funding. Here's our tax levy summary. County Executive Holman kind of went through. Last year, our tax rate was 524. We'll be down at 518 for the 2020 budget. We had significant growth in the past year. Previous year was like 3.27%. For the upcoming year is 5.36%. So that's what influences that tax rate. Countywide budget summary. Overall, we had a budget decrease of 10.58%. That doesn't mean that we had 10.5% of cuts. The major influence here in this budget decrease is the note proceeds and the capital outlay. In 2019, we had a couple things going on in capital projects. One was a larger bond proceed for almost $10.9 million for a highway remodel and renovation project. And the other factor was we had anticipated some bond proceeds with the way the building project was progressing. That didn't continue progression, and those anticipated bond proceeds that we had in the budget never actually happened. So you'll see a $14 million decrease there on note proceeds, and also a $18 million decrease in capital outlay. Those are the significant contributors to the decrease in the budget from 19 to 20. The other thing that happens is this is the modified budget, so it's not the one that you necessarily approved in November. It takes into account all the budget amendments that you had throughout the year. And if you recall, we come to you for grants, we come to you for new positions and things that happen throughout the year that might be kind of one-time things. They may not recur in the next year's budget. And we'll talk a little bit more about these categories a little bit later. In terms of this document, this is just a summary of where the tax levy goes, what the starting fund balances are, what the ending fund balance is projected to be at the end of 2020. Now, those are all estimates because I don't know what 12/31/2019 is going to look like till we get to 12/31/2019. But we do our best estimating to give you a picture of where we think we're going to end up. when I look at a couple highlights that I'd like to point out on here, for highway, you can see in the funding balance applied use column, there's about $1.2 million there. That reflects the vehicle registration fee that we started in 2019. So one of the things that we're doing with the vehicle registration fee right now is we are putting that into a fund to offset projects, but in order to do that, we need to build up a little bit of a fund so we have money to pay for the projects. So we've worked out a strategy where we're going to borrow every other year for highway and use vehicle registration fee as well. And we're trying to determine right now if that means a 2-year borrowing cycle, we borrow for 2 years or borrow for 1, and then the next year use vehicle registration fees, and working out that system. But that represents vehicle registration fees primarily that we're putting away and saving for later. If you go down a little bit farther in that special revenue section for the business park, there's a amount to add to the fund balance. That's us anticipating that we're going to sell those remaining lots in the business park. If that doesn't happen, that number will change, but right now we're anticipating the sale of those lots. Under enterprise funds for healthcare center, you can see that for fund balance, we've noted that we're going to add $136,000 to their fund balance. We did that because that's a contingency amount we added to their budget. We're hoping we don't need to spend it, but we know that they have possibly some unexpected operational expenses or maybe building repairs, so we did add a contingency to their budget. If it's not spent, then it would be added to their fund balance, and that's how we have it listed in there right now. And then under internal service funds, health insurance, just to point out that there's a reduction of about $1.2 million back to County Executive Homan speech earlier. That $1.2 million represents the amount that we're going to use in fund balance to offset medical claims expenses and administrative expenses in the health insurance fund by keeping those premiums flat. Overall, for all funds, we're reflecting about a $279,000 net change to those fund balances. This is the same summary, but by classification. We've sorted it by, not by fund, but by general government, public safety, public works, and so on, so you can get a little different view of where the revenues and expenses are in the budget and where the tax levy is as well. Same totals, just a little bit different view. For 2020 revenue highlights, I'm just going to give you a few high points. I'm not going to kind of go in the detail of everything that changed in the budget. We'd be here all night. But there are some highlights that I would like to give you. You can see that taxes is roughly 36.85% of our budget. Taxes doesn't just include property tax. It also includes sales tax, the vehicle registration fee, shared revenue, forest crop taxes. So it has some other categories as well. Of course, property tax is the largest component of that. Intergovernmental revenues is about 15% of our budget, or just over, and public charges for services is roughly 15%. Note proceeds dropped drastically because of the removal of the prior year note proceeds. And intergovernmental charges for services, which the difference between those intergovernmental revenues are grants, intergovernmental charges for services is us billing for a service like to another municipality. So all the work that highway does that they bill the state or they bill the county or they bill other local municipalities, it's a charge for services. In terms of taxes, the growth of the 7.73% is mainly made up of property tax increases of about $1.2 million. That has to do with $501,000 for general operational taxes, those amounts subject to the levy limit, $492,000 for debt service, and $218,000 for EMS. The other factor of that growth of $2.9 million is $1.4 million is associated with the vehicle registration fee. In terms of Intergovernmental revenues, major increases there, had to do with Health and Human Services, getting an increase to their community aids for children and family services that can go to services like Child Protective Services, in serving kids. ADRC had an increase of about $155,000. A lot of that is claiming for their Aging and Disability Resource Center. Based on their worker effort or their staff time, they can claim federal dollars that get reimbursed to the county, and they've been doing a very good job in claiming those dollars, so we had a significant increase there. And also the district attorney added a grant in his budget for TAD expansion, TAD Services Expansion Grant to help with the diversion program. We don't know if we're getting that grant yet, but it is added in our budget as if we are at this point in time. So those would be the major contributors there. I move the slide, sorry. Not much change in licenses and permits or fines and forfeitures. Very little movement there. Public charges for services. We did have some decreases. Our EMS fee collection has been down. It's not that we're doing less runs or less services. The reimbursement rate is trending downwards. It's harder to get paid by third-party payers. We did implement a fee increase in 2019 to help offset that, but we still are looking at the trends, and they still are trending downward. Solid waste also had a lower amount for tipping fees. Health and Human Services had an increase actually of about $367,000, but we had a corresponding decrease in debt service of payments that were from the airport to pay off their debt service, and that has since been paid, so that won't be in next year's budget. So that's the major contributor there. Intergovernmental charges for the increase there is associated primarily with highway, also with health insurance. Highway has about $540,000 billed back to the Special Revenue Fund and other funds, as well as health insurance shows an increase of about $595,000 in premium contributions in the health insurance budget. Miscellaneous revenue is an increase associated with interest income. Note proceeds, I kind of talked about those already. And other financing sources is a combination of fund balances used for various equipment replacements or programs where they have designated funds to use for certain services. For example, in the 2020 budget, it's a even numbered year, so we plan for more elections. We budget them flat. They use out a fund balance in a year where we have 4 elections. They put into fund balance when we have a year where there's 2. And we do those things to try to keep the budget as flat as we can. So that's a little bit about revenues. Just kind of move along. Expenses by classification. Few just quick highlights here. Health and Human Services is about 27% of the overall expenses. Public Works about 22. General Government 17. Those are our major areas. Public Safety is almost 16%. One thing that I did look at is even though there's some shifting and increases for the functional areas, like the percentage change for general government went up almost 9%. Sorry, I gotta look down at my paper because my eyes can't see that. Health and Human Services went up about 3.8%, and Public Works went up about 3.5%. One of the things that I did look at is in terms of their discretionary revenue. And when I say that, I mean income that the county receives that they have the discretion of how they choose to fund things, whether it be sales tax or property tax or shared revenue. That's kind of discretionary funding. It's not a grant. It's not targeted to one thing. I looked at the percentages of how the money shifted in those different categories, and there wasn't a lot of movement. For example, general government last year was 19.89% of that fund, and in 2020, they were 19.85. So very little movement in the overall how the discretionary income was used. A lot of this change would have to do more with maybe they were funded with different user fees or had other grants or other types of funds that applied to that. But the money that we have the most choice in how we allocate, those really didn't shift. Another example is public safety was 32.44%. It's 32.24%. Public works, 10.49, 10.42. Health and Human Services, 7.56, 7.05. That was probably one of the bigger fluctuations. Culture Rec and Ed, 7.27, 7.11. Conservation and Development, 2.5 and 2.5. Biggest change was in debt service. That increased from 7.5 to 8.45. So that was the largest fluctuation in terms of how that money is allocated. General government, biggest offset for that change had to do with health insurance of about $1.2 million. Personnel-related costs, about $524,000. 250 of that is related to a wellness incentive program. So most of it is related to health insurance costs for general government. Public safety is about, of that increase, the major contributors was an increase for $240,000 for cardiac monitors and another roughly $145,000 towards new ambulance contracts for 2020 going forward. Public works, significant changes there were county highway services, additional architectural engineering expenses of $312,000, additional $296,000 towards the depreciation. And all of those make up that increase for public works. Health and Human Services is related to personnel costs, roughly, of about $800,000. That had to do with transferring a full-time psychiatrist in the department from a contracted psychiatrist to an employed psychiatrist, additional child welfare social worker, a child welfare assistant, and a part-time IHS social worker, and also an overall increase in contractual expenses at Health and Human Services. Culture Rec and Education had a decrease because of removal of prior year purchase order carryovers for trails maintenance, and Conservation and Development had a decrease related to the removal of the Business Council funding. And again, the capital changes were related to those no proceeds that I mentioned earlier for those projects. Debt service, the reduction there has to do with the elimination of that debt service payment for Central Wisconsin Airport, as well as there was another note from that same year that was paid as well. So those are the major contributing factors. That's not everything, but those are just some of the big highlights that make up those larger dollar amounts of change for expenses. In the next tab, this is expenditures by type. Just a little different look at how our expenditures break out. The first is kind of the who, is it public safety, public works? This gives you kind of the what. Is it personnel? Is it contracts? Is it building materials? What are the types of expenses that we have here in the county? We're required to show you fund balance of what we estimate for 19 and 20, which is on some of those earlier documents I provided. This just kind of breaks it out in a little bit more detail, so you can see the different categories of fund balance in terms of whether it's non-spendable, restricted, committed, assigned. I will say that for 2019, we are projecting a surplus in the general fund of about $915,000 based on the estimates that staff put in. That's in a budget our size, less than 1% variance from what we budgeted. So if we come in within under 1%, I'll be pretty happy that that's the number that we came in at. But we'll see how that plays out for the last part of this year. Last year, when we did have a surplus in the general fund, we chose to transfer that money to the capital improvement fund. Capital improvement fund has been getting lower in terms of its available assigned fund balance. It's assigned to projects for those projects to be carried out, most of the fund balance in capital. But when we do have a savings, it's an opportunity, especially with general fund dollars, to use it on things that are one time. We do have a fund balance policy that restricts us from using it for ongoing operations. And the reason for that is when you have a structurally balanced budget, you want to use your current year resources to pay for your current expenditures. And these wouldn't be current resources in a future year, because you couldn't rely on them to continue. So capital is always a good way to reinvest those dollars into things that you want to accomplish. This is the 2020 estimated fund balance, just carrying forward the fund balance estimates that we had, taking into account the 2020 proposed budget to give you information in terms of where we predict we will end 2020 if it goes according to budget. The unassigned fund balance in the general fund is roughly about $14.34 million. That is well within our fund balance policy. Our fund balance policy says we need to keep 15 to 25% of certain types of operating expenditures in unassigned reserve. And that puts us, I think, at 20.9. I'd have to look it up, but it's right in those low 20s in terms of where that fund balance would end up according to this budget. Just information in here on the budget process and timeline, what it takes to put together the budget, which the County Executive Holman already went through. We included a copy of our current strategic plan in the budget as well. Here's our 2020 capital project listing. This is based on what was put in the capital improvement plan for 2020 through 2025. We've added the building control software, additional funds to continue with the design and concept for the government facility building. We have some projects in parks for pit toilet replacements, chip sealing some roads, and a project that is already underway for the Jordan Park Dam, and some repairs, and also a 2020 aerial photography program. Both the Jordan Park Dam and the aerial photography program or project will be offset by other funds that have been saved for those projects as well. A little bit about debt service. Debt service at the end of 19 will have outstanding, if we don't issue any more debt before the end of the year, we'll have outstanding just over $15.5 million. We anticipate in 2020 with highway projects that will issue another roughly $2.4 million. That'll bring our outstanding debt up to $17,875 by the end of 2020. Potentially, if you look at the 2020 budget year under the outstanding debt limit, total county equalized val, we can issue debt for up to 5% of our total county equalized val. We have to subtract off any outstanding debt that we have, making our available debt limit almost $300 million, which is about 94.4% remaining available on our debt limit. That's a lot. I never recommend actually borrowing that much money. We've talked about this before, but we're well within the debt limit prescribed by statute. equalized property value by municipality. This is just informational, so you can see the shifts of equalized val in the different municipalities. We have a 3-year trend on here, so you can see where the growth was overall. And again, we had very good growth in for the 2020 budget year. And then just a chart that kind of shows the history of the county's equalized property value and property tax and the tax rate. So you can see our tax rate is actually going down. Our corresponding tax levy is going up about just over 4%. And we had growth in the county of 5.36%. A little summary on positions and FTEs. We did add 7 new positions to the budget. There are also, if you do the math, you can see that from 2019 to 2020, there's more than 7 positions that increased, and that's back to what I said earlier. We had positions throughout 19 that came through mid-year that we approved, so this is comparing what you approved at budget time to what is in the proposed budget. So that's why that's a little bit different. And that's kind of it for the budget in brief. I just want to say thank you to the department directors. They did a lot of work, a lot of hard work, and thank you to the finance staff. I have our finance management team here. We wouldn't be able to pull this together without them, so thank you. And a little bit about the budget process as you go forward. If you have meetings or want myself or any member of our finance team to come to a meeting, or you want to stop by our office or call us. If it's not me, if it's a liaison with one of the departments that work with your departments where you are a governing committee for, we are more than happy to come to those meetings and to participate or take a phone call. We actually welcome that. So stop by the office if you want. Again, we'll be happy to explain. And that's it.
Okay, thank you, Jen.
Yeah.
Sit down and take care of yourself.
Yeah.
I'll take a motion to recess the county board meeting and convene as a committee of the whole. Motion by James Supervisors Droik, seconded by Supervisor Jim Gifford. All in favor with aye? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. If any of the staff or anybody else would like to be excused, feel free. County board portion, we will reconvene just to adjourn, so. With that.
Order question, when am I allowed to ask that?
What's that, Melissa, Supervisor?
If I have a point of order question, when am I allowed to ask that?
Anytime. Would you like to ask it now?
If I may?
You may.
Thank you. I guess I'm trying to get to the mic. Oh, I'm trying to shout, and I've been told not to touch the mic by county or city staff, so I don't touch the mic.
This is a county.
I know.
Who are they?
Yes, but I'd like to stay in their good graces as well, if I can. And so I just want to get to the public comment section. It seems that there needs to be, even though we're convening into committee of the whole, which allows this body to have fairly open discussion, it's listed in the agenda, and perhaps you should not have listed it as public comment opportunities, and maybe the public comment opportunity would come in at reconvene to county board meeting, and I would ask Attorney Ray for sort of an opinion on that, because it is listed as public comment, and of course it is at the reasonable control of the chair.
Correct.
However, it is listed, and it's somewhat erroneous otherwise.
And I guess I would speak to that somewhat as well, and I may also ask our resident expert from the Wisconsin Counties Association when I introduce him as well to chime in. But this is the first time we've ever done this. We're chartering some new ground here, and I made a note here. I look at that as probably incorrect of having the public in there, but So I guess I'll take my lumps on that one because of the fact that I feel it. But there is plenty of opportunity. I think I stated at the beginning for the public to speak and to speak to us, and we have very little opportunity to do that and to have the interaction. So that's the main purpose of this. I wasn't trying to sneak anything by anybody, and we had actually asked for Wisconsin counties to look at this agenda before we presented it. So it wasn't caught there, and it wasn't caught by us either. So it was a mistake, I would say, and I'll try and, if we ever do any committees of the whole in the future, I will correct that.
Our ability to have free discussion should not be on the backs of the public and their ability to speak. So
Duly noted, but I believe that we as a governing committee have no opportunity to interact with one another.
I agree.
And for us to take the liberty of 1 hour, I think is well within our purview. So, Supervisor O'Connell, or Neville, Supervisor Neville.
I just wanted to ask, picking up on
Please use your mic.
Picking up on Supervisor Johnson's request, since this was a mistake, and since it was only one person from one citizen that wanted to speak, it seems reasonable to me that after we reconvene the board meeting, which is after we've talked as a committee of a whole, that person would be able to make, comments for several minutes. That way, we haven't inconvenienced somebody by a mistake we made on here, and we've listened to the citizen that came to speak.
Citizens.
Let's hear from our
Let's hear from WCA,
professional
please.
here.
Yeah. Dave, did you have any comments to this, or?
Not a whole lot to add, other than that's essentially up to the discretion of the chair. I would remind everybody, though, that what the board is going to discuss collectively when it's operating as the committee of the whole, that's not going to preclude the public from commenting at future meetings. Nothing's being decided tonight. This is only a discussion, so there will be plenty of ample opportunity at future meetings for the public to register and present their comments under a public comment section at those future meetings.
I will take it under advisement. With that, I would ask that I'd like to introduce John Hockenhammer from Wisconsin Counties Association. He has graciously accepted the invitation to come down here and help us with our first committee of the whole. So,
Good evening, John.
That's not necessary. So thank you, Mr. Chairperson, county board members, county executive, and other staff as well in the audience. So I'll give you a little background on myself, and then I'm going to tell you why I suggested committee of the whole meeting.
John, can you move a little closer? We've got someone who's a little harder.
Is that better?
Hearing. There you go.
Okay. So my experience, I'm a dairy and beef operator from Manitowoc County, and got involved in town government when I was in my early 20s, so over 40 years ago, about 43 years ago. And I was involved in town government, farmland preservation, those types of things. I was also the assistant fire chief in our town. And then in '84, I ran for the county board, served 4 terms on the county board in Manitowoc, including my last term as county board chair. And then I went to work for WCA for 2 years. I lobbied for them. I left 9 years. I was elected as a sergeant at arms for the state senate. And then I came back to WCA in September of '02. Also, when I left Manitowoc, I was bored because I was no longer milking cows. So I decided to run for the city council in Verona. And I served from 1997 until April of 2016 on the Common Council, and I was mayor there from 2006 to 2018, and it was at my dad's funeral 2 years ago in October where I made the decision at his funeral it was time to spend more time with the grandkids. So that's why I'm no longer in office now, but I still have the opportunity to do these types of meetings, and I absolutely love it. So I was in Stevens Point, and I will tell you, this is the honest truth, I spend more time in Stevens Point than any other city in the state of Wisconsin except Verona, where I live. So the association uses the Holiday Inn a lot for our meetings, and I'm here a lot. It was at one of those meetings, we were meeting with county facilities managers in the annex, and we were talking about facilities and other things, and on my way out, I happened to bump into your county board chair and also the county executive, and we started talking about educational opportunities and just ways to get the board and committees and so forth more engaged. And one of the things that I've used over the past, and most cities and a lot of the larger villages use it, counties don't use it as much, but I was just in Grant County and we used the committee of the whole process there as well. So as we know, and I'll talk about county government, but the majority of the heavy lifting that we do is at the committee level. It's not at the board level. Certainly the board weighs in, but it's at the committee level where the majority of the work is done. Well, not everybody serves on all those committees, so it's very easy to get, the silo mentality of just looking at those oversight committees and the issues that you're on. So the purpose of a committee of the whole is you get the entire board engaged. It's much more of an informal process. So it allows discussion by everyone as a committee rather than as a full board. And if you were to look at Robert's Rules of Order, it'll tell you that a committee of the whole is less formal in that usually the time limits where a board member has the ability to speak or how often a person can speak, they go out the window unless your specific board rules say something else. So it allows everybody an opportunity, and it also allows everyone on the board the opportunity to fully express your opinions. You're not limited to any time frames or so forth or the number of times that you can speak. So it's much more of an informal conversation. Usually, as a committee of the whole, you set a deadline that such and such as, you're only going to go an hour, hour and a half. And you limit it to certain things on the agenda. So for City Council, we use Committee of the Whole a lot. We may talk about strategic planning. We may talk about a bike and pedestrian plan. We may talk about upcoming development, but we would intentionally limit it to certain things on the agenda so we didn't get off on all these tangents. And we were very strict about that those are the topics that we would be talking about. Because, and I think this is a good thing, because we have to follow the open meetings law, it allows everyone to have input in an open and transparent process. And that is extremely important. The other thing with the Committee of the Whole is that you don't take any votes in the Committee of the Whole. So everything that you do in the Committee of the Whole, you can do things by unanimous consent, or you can make recommendations to the board, but there are no votes in the Committee of the Whole. Again, you want everybody to feel more free with the conversations and getting involved. So again, any potential actions or directives would be given as a recommendation to the board or to the county staff. So I think the goal here, my goal, and I'm only, I'm not speaking on behalf of WCA, I'm just doing this because I was hoping that I can help in bringing more conversation and more thought process into some of the discussions that you're having. So my goal tonight is that we talk about the infrastructure needs and the maintenance needs of the county, and that you provide an opportunity to the Space and Properties Committee, to the county board, to the county executive and other staff to learn what additional information is needed so that you can make fact-based, good educational decisions that best meet the needs of the residents of Portage County. That should be your number one goal. you should always be looking out at what's best for the needs of the county residents. So in County Executive Holman's budget presentation, he talked about some of the challenges and hurdles that you have. He did a great job, I think, running through the budget. You know, one of the things I remembered him saying was 41-some%, I think, were employee costs, personnel costs. And if you need to take a look at cuts or holding things flat, you know, personnel costs have to be part of that. Now, one of the other things to remember there is that what we do in county government, so much is mandated by the state because we have that partnership with the state. So our discretionary funds in local government are very, very, very small. So even if you take a look at, okay, we need to cut personnel costs, so we're going to look in that, you know, that 41%, a lot of that 41% you can cut because it's mandated. So it's important as we move forward that we have these conversations so that if you need additional information and if you have concerns, that all those things are brought open in the public to the full board so that everybody is hearing the same thing at the same time. Because I know it's easy to happen. I've seen it happen in communities where I've been involved, where you get small groups of people that are having conversations. People are not hearing the same thing at the same time, and rumors start and those types of things. So what we're looking at tonight, again, is so we're going to create a list here. We're not going to go and debate and start having discussion on each one of those lists, but Mindy has graciously offered that she's going to take notes as we go through tonight. Maybe it wasn't graciously offered. I think it was more arm twisting, but Mindy's going to do it for us, so thank you. But it's important that we have that information. And I wanted to give two examples, and I've used committee of the whole process for this. The position that you never want to be in was the position that we were in when I got on the county board in Manitowoc. The board had voted about 4 or 5 times on a new jail, and every time that vote was taken, a little bit more than the majority of the board, with no rationale, said, cut it in half, it's too expensive. Every time it came back, it was cut it in half, cut it in half. And in the end, what happened is the state of Wisconsin came in and said, we're giving you 6 months. You will have a plan in place, and you will have taken initial action where the county board has agreed to borrow the money. If you're going to have that type of a facility improvement, whether it's a renovation or expansion or a new facility, that is pretty difficult to get that accomplished in 6 months. So what I would suggest to you and encourage to you is that you try and do as much as you can on your own time frame rather than somebody else forcing you to make that decision. The second example, when I got to be mayor, we had a relatively new town chair as well. And since the 70s, they were talking about a boundary agreement between the city of Verona and the town of Verona. And people said, John, you're wasting your time. It's never going to happen. We've been trying to do it since the 70s. There's been a number of different committees that have been working on this, and it has never happened. And I said to the town chair, we have reasonable people, both on the town board and in city council. We need to do this now. We need to compromise. We need to sit down. We need to bring back something to our respective boards and get it passed while we have reasonable people and do long-term agreements. And that's exactly what we did. 20-year agreement with 2-year expansions on that. There was a will to get something done. And because there was the will to get something done, we put everything else aside and we made sure that we got it done. So again, tonight, unless I'm directed different, what I would like to do is, if we can, and we'll do it through the county board chair, if there's a list of items that you have on your mind that you want to talk about, what needs to be done, things that need to be considered. And one of them I will point out. You've had a long-standing partnership with the city of Stevens Point. And that's important. That partnership is important. And you need to have conversations with them as to how you're going to move forward. You know, is it combined as it is now? Is it separate facilities? Are the facilities going to be downtown? You know, all those types of things that need to be answered. So, Mr. Chair, if that's acceptable, we will start taking a list of things that you want added to the list so that your Space and Properties Committee, the county board, and county staff can start working on to gather information that you need to make educated decisions. So with that.
If you have a topic, please raise your hand and we'll, Supervisor Droit.
Let's go right to the top, right to the elephant in the room. How about our public safety building? We've been studying it, the item. I've been on the board almost 20 years. It seems like it's been on there that many years. Are we going to focus on keeping it downtown or moving it? We've been getting varying opinions on the direction from our city people. And every time we flip open the paper, we're going, we're not, we're going, we're not. I'd like a direction to understand which is going to be our direction.
Okay, that's a good one to start with. Again, we're not going to debate things, at least at this point. We're going to put things on the list that need to be addressed.
Supervisor Pataki.
In 1990, the present jail was built. We were understaffed at that time. And then 30 years later, we are still understaffed. We are also understaffed in dispatch and deputies. The last time we added a road deputy was in 1997 when I was the sheriff. So we need to do something to help the sheriff with all the, if you look at his report, you can see that the number of calls have increased tremendously, and we don't have enough people to take care of calls.
So, Mindy, we may want to add, just so we're sure in the future, so understaffed at the Sheriff's Department, is that, you weren't specifying other departments, this is at the Law Enforcement Center.
Supervisor Matt Jakowski.
Adding on to Jim's there, at one time the jail was a focus, as Jim talked about, public safety building. The jail was a focus, All of a sudden here, a couple of years ago, we shift focus to the courts. So what is the focus? Is the jail the focus? Is the courts a focus? Is a combined building a focus?
Supervisor Robbie.
In terms of information that I'd like to have in terms of the decision-making process, I'd like to know what our parameters are for expenditures and for operations that we can live with. Because what I think has happened from board to board to board is that everyone agrees we have to do something, then we hire a specialist. The specialist's job is to ask everybody what they want. Everybody tells what they want, and that's a self-engorging process. And by the time it's done, and they actually have to put the number out there, it's no longer tenable, and then people say, okay, we got to get away from this. So I'd like to look at what is tenable, what can we afford, and then take it to the specialists and say, hey, this is our problem, these are the resources we have, now what can you do with it? And if they come up with a plan, at least it's something that we know we can afford, and maybe we can get moving on rather than continually go for pie for the sky, and then we didn't even see a solid number the last year and a half at least. We haven't even got that far yet because the numbers have been so scary. So I think if we continue down that same avenue of just not having parameters in terms of what resources we have to address this, we're going to end up in the same place where a majority of the people around here are going to say, hey, we can't do it, which I think would be unfortunate.
So not that I want to put words in your mouth, but you're talking about the financial capacity of the county, and how does one project fit in with other projects?
No more specific. I want to know what kind of resources we have to address the public safety and the courthouse, or together or separately, and what kind of resources we have realistically to operate those. And then whatever we do, we hopefully will fit within those, because right now it seems like we really don't have parameters at all. And I think we're going to be really scared with the end number, the way we're heading again this time.
Okay.
Is that almost 3 questions? You know, I want to try and make sure we get it right, you know, because it seems like there's almost 3 questions or 3 topics there, which is fine, but I just want to make sure we address them.
Yeah, I want to know parameters for either building the jail and the courthouse, or together, however they do that. And I want to know parameters for the operational expense for running the jail and the courthouse. Because whatever we build, obviously, is going to have some implication on operations. And if we build something we can't afford to operate, that would be kind of, people wouldn't be too happy with that either.
Right. Certainly when it comes to law enforcement, the type of facility that you build, whether it's employee-friendly or not, when I say that, I mean that from a staffing need, can really make a determination. So I mean, what we see in most counties where they move forward with a law enforcement facility is that they'll have higher upfront costs, but it saves them in the end on staffing issues, on staffing costs.
Supervisor Pataki.
Just to add to what Supervisor Jakowski said, we passed a resolution a year or two ago, 3 years ago. Our main focus was to be building a new jail, and we have gone away from that.
The one thing, if I could, Mr. Chair, is I would strongly encourage everyone on the county board, because in the end, it's going to be the county board that makes that decision, is to look to the future. You know, not that we shouldn't be reminded of what was said and what was done in the past, but we really need to look to the future and do what's in the best interest for the county residents.
Supervisor Laddick.
Going back to the 2020 project listing for the capital budget, I was pretty shocked when I see the government facility building concept and design for $775,000 for next year. I think we're a long ways away from giving anybody a green light to spend that kind of money before we can even decide what we're doing between ourselves. I think we've got a lot of decisions to make before we spend commit that kind of money to design.
John, can we make a comment to that, or I mean, to clear? Jenny.
Just as a clarification, that's not really funding any additional commitments. We already have an architect, we already have an owner's rep, we already have approved agreements where we've obligated funds. Part of how we were going to pay them was we were going to bond towards a project as we got further down the road. So now we have these kind of obligations and funding necessary to kind of continue to pay for the designs that we're doing along the way to get us to the answer that you want to be at. So we do have some, it's not new designing, it's kind of what we've authorized up to this point.
We draw.
Does that make sense?
Well, not really. I thought everything stopped when the city withdrew their agreement with the county. I thought everything was stopped at that point. So why are we spending money in 2020 when we can't even?
I think.
Go ahead.
Because it's in there, Jen, doesn't mean we're spending it.
Doesn't mean we're spending, but we do have existing agreements with architects and owners reps and folks that we've entered into agreements with that we need to have some funding to be able to pay them if we do engage them. Okay. And you are correct, we don't have to necessarily call them and spend it, but if you want them to do work, you're going to need money to have them to do the work.
Absolutely.
So would that be just like a percentage then that's spent up until this point? You've allotted, say it's $800,000, and at this point you've only spent $600,000.
Yeah, we had agreements and resolutions passed where we entered into those agreements with those parties to do that type of work. And at one point, with the speed that the project was moving, you know, we were going to then have, you know, bond proceeds to reimburse us for that work. We don't have bond proceeds because we haven't gotten that far, so we need to put aside some money so you can do some work if you choose to do it. Does that make sense?
I would say also there's some money in our checking account for that. I'm really simplifying it, so that when we write checks, we got something to pay for it. There's no checks being written out of that account, though. Okay. Right.
But I think that also brings up a bigger question that needs to be addressed, and I can't answer that for you, and that is, do we need to do anything at all? You know, some people may say, well, why can't we just operate like we are now? You know, but you know, I know of a jail right now, a law enforcement center that's dealing with, they can no longer get parts for the locks on their doors. You know, so at some point, something needs to be done because you can't get the parts that you need. Or other reasons, but I think that is a big overall question that the county board is going to have to grapple with. You know, is do we have to do anything at all? And if so, by, and I'm just throwing these things out there, if so, by delaying maintenance and delaying a decision on moving forward, in the end, is that costing the county more money than not doing anything at all?
Supervisor Barry Jakowski.
I would have to say yes. We are way beyond that point of it's costing us more money. As Jim Supervisor Schreich said that we have been talking about this long prior to me being on this board. It's been on the minds of all of us since I've been on the board, and we've all done the same thing. Do we have to do anything? We kicked it down the road another year, another budget cycle, and we have to do something, or we will be that county that the state comes in and says 6 months from now, you better have something done.
Supervisor Bob Gifford.
Yeah, hi. I'd like to, this is I don't know, it's a suggestion. I'd like our county to be a lot more aggressive when dealing with the state legislature on certain questions. Of course, the levy cap was mentioned several times in the budget address, and I'd like that to be scrapped. But even beyond that, you know, if the state legislature is going to keep imposing mandates that people be incarcerated for something like cannabis use, for example, or minor drug offenses, or this or that other thing that keeps people incarcerated, that they're just contributing to the ongoing mass incarceration problem that the United States continues to have. So what we need to find are some voices in the legislature that really get the theme that I heard out of the Counties Association meeting, evidence-based policymaking, because all we have now is ideology-based policymaking, politics-based policymaking. You know, all local governments are nonpartisan. We don't have to answer to a party structure. We don't have to answer to the chair of the state party. We have to answer to our people. And our people have problems, and the sum of all their problems is the evidence that we need to take to the state to get them to take action and get a lot of this draconian legislation off the books. So I hope that we will look at becoming a lot more vocal, noisy, annoying county to the legislature and make them get off their butts and start to do some evidence-based policymaking with regard to especially incarceration, including juvenile detention. Thank you.
I would make two comments to that. The first one is, and first of all, we talk a lot about the partnership that we have with the state of Wisconsin, and county government in Wisconsin is very different than counties in other states as far as how we run our human services programs, the welfare programs that we do on behalf of the state. The highway departments were the only county, the only state in the country where the counties do the maintenance and the snow removal on the state and federal highway system once they're built. So we're very different. But my first comment is, if you can figure out how to get the legislature to play nicer with county government, you and I need to talk, because we all want that to happen. The second thing is you're talking about some policy changes. And the point that I want to make here is there is absolutely no reason that policy decisions and discussions at the local level can't happen at the same time as you're having conversations about infrastructure needs. You can do both of those. And I agree with you that I think that there can be some policy decisions change. But I will tell you this. I come from a family of 6 boys, and I have an adopted sister. And for 17 years, my parents operated a home for juvenile delinquent boys in Manitowoc County. I was not one of them, but for juvenile delinquent boys in Manitowoc County. We can institute programs. We can do all the things that we believe that we should do. You still are going to have bad girls and bad boys, and they grow up and become adults, and they're bad men and bad women. We're always going to have some of that. So we need to keep that in mind, and we can have those conversations about what our infrastructure needs are and what policy changes might be. We can have them at the same time.
Supervisor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've been saying now for a bit and am spending a lot of time evaluating criminal justice reform, and I think that's what Supervisor Gifford was getting at, and I would caution on evidence-based policymaking. depending upon how you use your metric, you can actually create more institutionalization based on poverty and race. So it's a metric that can be used, but it needs to be used cautiously. I still want to know, and we don't have this, and this is a parallel conversation as it relates to policy, which I love, and it is, what is the impact of non-monetary bail? Should we start moving to that? What is the impact of a potential movement of 17-year-olds from the adult justice system back into the juvenile justice system? What is the impact of decriminalization of marijuana? What is that impact? What is the impact of poverty on our jail population? Because I've been spending time talking with a judge, and he estimates, and again, this is just anecdotal, that about half of the people sitting in our jail, and I'm not calling it a correctional facility because it's certainly not, it is a jail, put them away, lock them up. If half of the people sitting there are sitting there on bail holds because A, they can't afford an attorney because they fall in that gap, they're not indigent, they can't afford a public defender, they don't make enough to afford an attorney, and there is a gap time in them being able to obtain counsel. So we have a host of issues, and that relates to due process rights under the Constitution. We're not having any of those conversations. We're starting to. Our district attorney is starting a non-monetary bail work group. Our last meeting was canceled for some reason. But this needs to be a focus because this impacts the brick and mortar. We cannot have a brick and mortar conversation until we better understand those things. We also need to have a conversation about the cost of home monitoring. We shouldn't be putting people deeper into poverty because they made a wrong choice. And as I told Chief Deputy Chad Billab in Marathon County when I've used jail labor, and he thanks me, and I remind him the difference between them and me, they were caught. We've all made stupid mistakes. So those are the discussions that I see as most critical and are not happening at the pace I would like to see.
Again, it's why I point out that policy decisions, you have to do both. You have to talk infrastructure and maintenance needs and policies. And the thing, though, is I think you would agree, we've known each other a long time, I think you would agree that policies change from time to time.
They do.
Things are cyclical. So we need to talk both. We need to go down both paths at the same time.
Supervisor Jim Gifford.
Trouble remembering?
Yeah.
John, I'd like to take a little bit of exception to something you've said, which is we have a nice partnership with the state. No, we don't. Unlike cities and towns and townships, county board is an instrument of the state. They can tell us what to do, and I don't think a lot of people realize that. They don't have to partner with us. They can just flat out tell us what to do. And the only way to change that, I think, is, as Bob suggested, is to put pressure on the state to make some of these changes. I mean, I think the levy limit is the dumbest thing anybody's ever done. If this county wanted to spend 3 times more on health and human services, and that's going to require a levy increase, we ought to be able to do it.
I would just add that we spend every day talking to the legislature about the partnership that we have. And you're right, it is different, and they can tell us what to do. And when we do the roles and responsibility and where we get our authority from as county government, we specifically talk about that. So there is a partnership. We wish that it was a stronger partnership. I agree, that's something that we need to talk about. That's not going to change overnight either.
Supervisor Mua.
So for me, I think every time I speak, someone always thinks I'm against building a new jail, and that's not necessarily it. For one, I think for me to even make a decision or to have a discussion, we need to have a discussion like this about what our values of this county is around our criminal justice system. Also look at our current policies of how we're making these decisions and these conversations available to those most impacted, because I can tell you a meeting at 7:30 in the morning is not really accessible to those who are most impacted. good.
Supervisor Moresi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, John, for coming.
Please use the mic.
Doing my best here. Thanks for coming in and facilitating this. It's really valuable. I'd like to reiterate the point of right-sizing our corrections to fit our community needs based on how we're diverting people now, based on the points that Supervisor Johnson made and Supervisor Moa. I think it's really important we look at this through a criminal justice reform lens, because these are people we're dealing with and people that we are serving. And if we decide to build a jail, hypothetically, that was proposed at 144 beds and a large juvenile detention center, it's not a matter of how we fill it. It's just a matter of when. It will be filled. That's how it goes, unfortunately. Another point I'd like to make is how incredibly important the partnership with the city of Stevens Point is to this decision making. I think collaboration and getting their input is part of this this decision that's going to make the most impact for the greatest amount of people. I think we need to get all those parties at the table. I don't know how we do that. I don't know if we have a joint city council Portage County Board meeting, or if we get the equivalent Space and Properties and Redevelopment Authority folks together. I don't know how that works, but it'd be really nice to get them engaged in this discussion. And I feel up until now it's been kind of hasn't been as fruitful as we would like it to be, and I think we can fix that.
Again, I would just say that if there is a, if there is a will, you can accomplish almost anything. And I've worked a lot with collaborations and partnerships like that. And the key thing is you build the relationships, you build trust, so that once key individuals are gone, whether they're staff or elected officials, because there's always turnover in elected officials, you need to build that relationship and that trust. So when key people are no longer there, that those partnerships and those collaborations continue. It's not just a once and done type thing. But you know, I mentioned it early on in my comments about the partnership that you currently have, and that's important. That is really important. You can't leave them out. I would encourage you to meet with the city on a regular basis.
Supervisor Merle.
I'm sorry. If we could just get back to the building of the jail and the government complexes, I just feel like we have kind of a group of people who are probably more city areas that are for a big spending project. And then we have some people in agricultural communities, outlying areas where they don't see as direct a benefit from it. And so they have more traditionally been opposed. They have different financial stresses and opinions. I just wish that we could maybe get some, like we never have consensus. Like if we could get a committee of the people who are opposed to a big spending project, and you say, okay, what could you stomach? What could we do? And they say, okay, my community is opposed to the 140 millions, the 150 millions, but what if we did this one project and we capped it at this amount? And then we try to work with the people who are opposed to these big spending projects. We have some agreement on what we could move forward on. I feel like the problem is everything is this huge consulting fee, this huge project, and these multi-level things. And they're so overwhelming and they're so expensive. It never matters. Even if we have these little hops forward, we're never going to have that big bonding pass, because there are too many people in these areas that just, they could never get reelected if they voted for it. Their whole constituency is against it. So I just wish that we could maybe step out, start with like these little towns of Grants and Stockton and everywhere, and we could see what agreement what they could go for. And then we work outside in. I feel like it's always city out. Like, well, we want this, 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 this. We have to just pay, and it just never works. And so all these years, we just go another one. It never goes anywhere. If we could start reasonable and get one thing done, like get the jail safe for the people, for the staff, improve the system, and we get that one thing done, and then we do one other thing. And I just feel like we never go anywhere.
Yeah, we when I talk a little bit about strategic planning, we talk about stakeholders, and certainly, the state of Wisconsin is a stakeholder here because they're a partnership with us. I know some people don't like when I talk about the partnership, but it's true. We are in a partnership. It's a little bit more one-sided, but we are in a partnership with the state. But any resident of this county is a stakeholder, and you need to take a look at who the stakeholders are in your community, and especially if it's intentional on someone's part to exclude them from the process, that's not a good thing. So, I think getting that involvement from the public, but the first step is also to educate on what the needs are. To educate on, to go out, and I think, the county executive talked about going out and meeting with individuals or smaller groups or whatever. Those are the types of things that need to be done so that you do get some buy-in. I know tonight we're talking mainly law enforcement, and we only have about 10 minutes or a little bit more left. So what I'd like to suggest is, and not that law enforcement's not important, but are there other facility needs that we should also be talking about, not just the jail? And if so, then we need to prioritize which ones come first. And is it built on, even if it's in the downtown area, is it more of a campus type setting? Are we going to do piecemeal, that type of facility?
Supervisor Barry Jakowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members of the body. I guess I would like to address Supervisor Morrow's comments about the outlying areas. I think if you remember, it's probably about 6 months ago, I said to this body that please, when you're out talking to your constituents, and I do come from that agricultural-based small community, in my community, we stop, we talk with each other, we spend time on the corners in our pickup trucks till somebody behind us blows the horn, and they wonder what we're talking about. Many a times when it comes to me, they're asking what's going on in the county and what's going on with the new building project. And I educate my constituents, say, there are those on the body that think that we should piecemeal it to keep the cost down to begin with. And I asked each and every one of us to educate your constituents and say we can't piecemeal this thing together. I think it's a waste of county dollars. I think the end product won't be nearly as nice. The engineering won't be as nice. The architecture won't be as nice. But when she says when Supervisor Morrow says the outlying areas are not in favor of it, the outlying areas from my constituents say they're not against it. Just don't build it downtown where you have to shoehorn it in where it's going to cost you more money, and I can't find a place to park when I show up at the facility. So to say that the outlying communities, I think the outlying communities, there are bad people of those of us in the outlying communities that end up incarcerated as well. So it's not a situation where they don't feel that there needs to be a jail. They just have a problem when they can't come down here and find a place to park, whether they're called for jury duty or they come to see the register of deeds and they can't find a place to park.
Supervisor Machikowski, do you have a comment? You had your hand up, or no?
No.
Supervisor Bob Gifford.
Yeah, as far as addressing the city versus rural, small city divide, so to speak, I think that all the folks that have been speaking up more in defense of decarceration and using the advanced science of criminal justice that's developing now, I think we're generally in favor of a less expensive, less gigantic project, not a big Taj Mahal sort of thing, but something that relies more on human resources rather than brick and mortar resources. In other words, if we want to rehabilitate people, if we want to get people back into the workforce, if you want to have people who are not violent at home, all those things take a lot of education, social work, psychology, the sort of things that we do in health and human services. So I hopefully we won't frame it as city people want this big Taj Mahal project and rural people just want to be fiscally responsible, because it's way more complex than that, I think.
One of the things that I've found over the years is that if you engage, whether it's here the county with the city, or you're engaging elected officials with the taxpaying public or residents, you find out if you start having conversations that you agree on a lot more than what you disagree on. So it's important to have those conversations. I completely agree with you. I did want to mention one of the things when we talked about the partnership that currently exists between the city and the county. And my understanding that there's also some facility needs for the city as well. It's not just the county that has facility needs. So I think that's something that, you know, it's your list. It's not my list. But I see that more as an opportunity than I see it as a challenge, because hopefully, again, if you have willing partners, you can have those types of conversations to do what's best overall, not just for the city, not just for the county, but to have those conversations. And you're going to have those conversations because you're currently in that partnership with the city as well. So if you vacate a building, you know, there's going to be additional costs. I don't have to go into details there. You know better than I do. But it's important that you have those conversations. Again, I'd like to stress that we've been talking more about law enforcement and the jail. That's important. Are there other facility needs that you think that weigh into this that have impact on debt and other decisions that the county are going to be making?
Supervisor Zastro.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Certainly, there are other issues, and I guess I'd put the healthcare center up front as one of those. And I just wanted to comment, not deeply on that, but that, you know, there's a cost of doing business. And I know we don't like to think of ourselves as a business, but really we kind of are. And you know, if we're talking about a new law enforcement center, justice center, a healthcare center, what really comes first in those as the cost of doing business is public safety. So that needs to be addressed in all of those areas, and we've touched on it, but I think, you know, there is cost of doing business, and we have to look at those costs and do our jobs.
Anyone else? Supervisor Gussel.
One quick
Use the mic, please, Charlie.
One quick comment in regard to parking facilities. You think you got problems now. Look 50 years down the road, even 10. This problem has to be addressed, and there's no quick fix by parking downtown.
Supervisor Barry Jakowski.
I guess I'll put this question to you, John. You've heard some of the difficulties we have, and as you spoke, you did offer some opinions on how we can get some of these done. Is there anything else on your mind that would help this body, as well as interacting with officials from the city of Stevens Point, to help move it along? Again, we've been talking about this. Many members of the body here spoke about how long this has been on our plates, and I think it's time that we move forward in one direction or another.
Well, in my opinion, and I've seen this work very well in Sauk County, Wisconsin, they have for probably close to 15 years, twice a year, they have what they call their intergovernmental meeting. And they invite, it's the county, the cities, the tech colleges, all the towns, the villages, the cities within the county. And it's something about what I talked about before. They have those meetings. They bring in speakers for those meetings. But they have the time that they spent together, you know, as elected officials, people that are working in the communities, and they build that relationship and trust with each other. And again, that's really key, especially when key elected officials, whether they decide not to run for re-election or they pass away or, you know, whatever, they get defeated, that you continue because that trust is there and the relationships are there, that you continue to work well together. So I think something, if I were here, one of the things I would first try is try to have a meeting like that. Invite all the municipalities within the county. You could rotate, where you hold the meetings. That's what they do in Sauk County as well. I could get you examples of agendas of things that they've done in the past. And I don't want to say that everything that's happening in the county is great as well, but that's the one thing that's worked very, very well for them. And just try that and see what kind of reaction that you get. Try and get elected officials to meet together and get to know each other, and invite staff to come along as well. I just think that's one thing that you could do very easily. The second thing I think is, when you talk about what some of the needs are for the county, don't be afraid to ask other counties what they've done. And if you need help, whatever the specific topic is, if you need help, give us a call and we can tell you who you might want to go talk to or which county you may want to go visit. Just at the end of August, the last week of August, I toured the new the law enforcement facility in Grand County. Another great law enforcement center is in Green Lake County. But not that you always have to travel outside of the county, but when you're making a major investment like that, I think that that's money well spent. But check with other counties and see what they're doing rather than recreating the wheel. And then finally, I think that in the end, it all comes down, really it comes down to money and what you can afford. And that is something that when the county executive puts together the budget and prepares and submits the budget to the county board, and then the county board debates and takes action, that is information that you really need. What is our capacity? Where are we with debt? What ratio are we to what we are allowed, or if you even have a policy that your policy is even more restricted than what the state puts on us. We heard discussion tonight about what your reserve levels are. So you have to make sure that I think I heard it somewhere tonight, that your house is in order. You have to. And from a financial, you got to be looking long term. That's not 1 year to the next year to the next year. You got to look long term, make sure that you understand the finances, and have people explain it to you. And if it takes more than once, you got to understand those finances, because that's really what's going to drive most other things.
Well, and that is, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
That is one of the points that we should all remember. If we would have done this project 10, 12 years ago, we'd have built it for half. We're here again, still with the same needs, but it's going to cost us basically 50% more than it would have 10 years ago.
We wanted to try and have a hard stop at 7, so Supervisor Johnson, I'll let you finish.
I will try to be as brief as I can, which is not very brief usually. First, I'm going to wear my city council president hat at this moment. There are members of council who have an interest, actually, in meeting with the county board, and also better understanding the work that all of the consultants have done over the course of years. Many council members are new to council and are not privy, haven't paid attention to that long litany of crud, let's just call it that way. You keep going back, John, to talking about, well, and then maybe it's being driven by us, or some of us, about, cost, brick and mortar, and looking at other counties. Have any counties actually evaluated the impact of criminal justice reform on right-sizing a law enforcement facility and the courts, and what does it cost to provide programming? Because I remember talking with Judge Flugar, and he goes, I wish we could invest in community-based programming to keep people out of jail. And I want that. I think that's a critical part of this discussion. I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, but if we keep going back to brick and mortar without having this difficult discussion about criminal justice reform and our values, as Supervisor Moa said, related to incarceration, or are we about corrections and making sure we have people returning to their families, returning to their city block, returning to maybe help in their schools, or do all the things necessary to be a productive part of our community? Has anybody done that?
I don't know. I can't answer that question for you, but I will tell you this, that I will go back to the office and I'll talk to Marcy and I'll talk to others and find out if, first of all, if they're aware of anything, because we should know that anyhow, right? But it's not part of my responsibilities that I usually work on, but I will do some background on that. And I really want to make the point, I started out saying this early on, that I'm not here to tell you what to do, and WCA is not here to tell you what to do. And I hope, even though I think it's important, I hope that people understand, that the board understands, that I'm not here talking just about a law enforcement center. I think that there's other needs that you might have, and keep in mind, and I tell people all this time as an elected official, every time before I voted, I always thought about what is the best for the community, for the people that I serve. And if you keep that in mind and there's a will to get things done and be successful, you will be successful. So, again, I wanted to make the point. When I came here tonight, it wasn't just to talk about law enforcement. You know, I think there's other needs. There's courts. There's, security type issues that you need to deal with. There's a whole host of issues that at some point the county is going to need to address. So I hope no one thought that I was here just talking about the law enforcement center, even though I believe it's very important.
Supervisor Dodge.
You know I always wait to the end.
You're waiting till the very, very end.
The very, very end. I guess I was taking a few notes, and the first one that I wrote was public safety. And I think I was very much in favor of building whatever downtown, because public safety, we have shown that there are needs at the jail, and there are definitely needs relating to the courts. So you can't hardly divide this project, but I guess getting back to my original comment, there was a call for help one evening, and a county deputy left the building across the street. Somehow or another, something happened, and he broadsided a car. A young lady, the driver, was killed. And that was the day that I started thinking maybe out of town might be a good thing. So I guess as part of this, I would like for the sheriff or safety control or whatever to show us how law enforcement circulates and how their scheduling is related, when they leave the building. When are they at the building? They shouldn't be at the building. They should be cruising, whatever. So focusing on public safety, when you come to the courts, we've fluctuated. What's first? The jail, the courts, whatever. It seems to me that we should have a basic overall plan. And instead of considering it piecemealing, you consider it phasing. That impacts your financing, and it impacts construction and how you determine where you're going to start and where you're going to end. And it seems to me we ought to be looking at that as well as a reality. And I know that Jenny has said that we would phase the financing. So it depends on the project, but you got to look at all the needs and be meeting them when you're doing this. It's not just the law enforcement, it's not just the jail. It's everything in this area. Thank you.
So, Supervisor Moresi, if you promise to keep it short.
Very short, and I'll use my microphone.
Thank you.
So what I'd really like to see is a side-by-side comparison with some real costs for downtown versus a suburban location. And within that, I'd like to see, if we're going to go on a green site, I want to see all that infrastructure cost that's going to be either paid for by city residents or by county residents. Either way, where somebody's getting the bill. So I'd like to see those costs, how they're put in there, infrastructure costs, social costs, environmental costs, if it's possible to get those kinds of numbers for a green site versus a downtown site and vice versa. I think that's really important. I'd also like to get us to get the plans for a downtown site and the suburban site and actually see what they look like, in the same renderings, so they're actually comparable, and potentially even looking at what BWBR did and what Venture did back in the day. So getting these points of view and a little bit more historical relevance in there for the county board members, so then we can be educated and up to speed to make a really good and sound decision. Thank you.
Supervisor Neville is the last one.
Well, it seems to me this has been helpful. It seems to me it's just been getting started, a discussion that we need to have as a group. There are 25 of us as supervisors, and this is the first real discussion amongst us. And we started out making a list. Now we have a better idea what each other's thinking. We can think about it. We can come back and we can move to another step in discussing with each other how we go about getting what our community needs. I'm new, and my impression has been of everybody I've met is that everybody cares about doing the best for this community and the best for their constituents. But I think we've just barely started here tonight with this kind of discussion amongst all of us. And I would like to see us, as soon as possible, continue this discussion. Thank you.
Motion to reconvene, Mr. Chair.
I got a motion and a second by James Gifford. All in favor with aye?
Aye.
Opposed?
Motion to adjourn, Mr. Chair.
I have made my decision to stick to not letting the public speak. They can come and speak next week. We're back again here the 8th, so I'll take a motion to adjourn by Supervisor Barry Jakowski, seconded by Supervisor O'Brien. All in favor with aye? Aye. Opposed? We're adjourned.
Videos of these meetings are available for viewing on the city's website, Stevens Point